The great chamber of the Galactic Council had stood for 12,000 years. It was built on Nexus Prime, a massive station floating in the empty space between star systems. Representatives from 47 different alien species filled the curved seats that rose up like a giant bowl. Strange creatures of every shape and size sat in their designated areas. Some breathed oxygen, others breathed methane, and a few existed as clouds of living gas contained in special suits. At the center of the chamber stood Ambassador Kevin Marshall. He was a tall man, with gray hair and calm brown eyes. He had served humanity for 30 years in this place, fighting for his species in a galaxy that had never fully accepted them. Behind him sat the rest of the human delegation, including his deputy, Linda Mercer, a woman with sharp features and an even sharper mind. High Arbiter Zelkoth of the Vexery Hegemony stood at the main podium. He was an insect-like creature with 6 legs, compound eyes, and mandibles that clicked when he spoke. The Vexery had always been suspicious of humans. They feared any species that grew too powerful too quickly. Zelkoth finished reading the resolution aloud. The document was long and filled with careful diplomatic language, but its meaning was simple. Humanity would be restricted to the Orion arm of the galaxy. They could not expand further. They could not build new colonies beyond their current borders. Their military would be limited. Their technology sharing agreements would be reviewed and controlled. The official reason given was concern about humanity's rapid advancement. In 93 years, humans had gone from a small species barely capable of interstellar travel to one of the most technologically advanced civilizations in the galaxy. This frightened many of the older species who had taken thousands of years to reach the same level. Kevin listened to every word without showing any emotion on his face. He had known this was coming. The whispers had been growing for years. Too fast, they said about humans. Too aggressive. Too unpredictable. It did not matter that human doctors had cured the shade plague that killed millions of Cathari. It did not matter that human soldiers had died defending alien colonies from the Void Reavers. Fear was stronger than gratitude. The vote is called, Zelkoth announced. All in favor of Resolution 7742 Alpha. Lights flickered across the chamber as each species registered their vote. Kevin watched the holographic display as the numbers appeared. 31 in favor. 12 opposed. 4 abstentions. The resolution had passed by a wide margin. Linda reached over and touched Kevin's arm. Her face was pale with anger, but she said nothing. There was nothing to say. They had lost. Kevin stood slowly from his seat. The chamber fell silent. Every eye, every sensor, every translator focused on the human ambassador for 93 years. Kevin began, his voice steady and clear. Humanity has served this council. We joined as a young species, eager to learn and contribute. We shared our sciences freely. We gave our medicines to any who needed them. We sent our soldiers to fight in wars that were not our own. He paused and looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of delegates from species he had worked with. For decades, when the Shade Plague swept through the Cathari homeworlds, it was human doctors who worked day and night to find a cure. When the Void Reavers attacked the outer colonies, it was human ships that held the line at Terminus Gate. 2,000 human soldiers died in that battle, defending worlds they had never visited, protecting people they had never met. The silence in the chamber was absolute. Even Zelkoth's mandibles had stopped clicking. And this is how you repay us, Kevin continued. With fear, with chains, with a resolution that tells us no matter how much we give, no matter how many of our people die for your protection, we will never truly be accepted here. We will always be the outsiders, the threat, the species to be contained. Ambassador Marshal Zelkoth interrupted, his voice carrying a tone of warning. The resolution has passed according to proper procedure. Humanity will comply with its terms or face consequences. Kevin looked at the High Arbiter for a long moment. Then he did something that shocked every being in the chamber. He smiled. No, he said simply. The word hung in the air like a physical thing. I am authorized by the United Earth Government to make the following announcement, Kevin continued. Humanity withdraws from the Galactic Council, effective immediately. Gasps and clicks and strange sounds of alarm rippled through the chamber. We withdraw our medical support programs. The human doctors and nurses currently serving on Cathari worlds will be recalled within 1 week. We withdraw our technology sharing agreements. All human patents, designs, and scientific data will be removed from Council databases. We withdraw our military treaties. Human ships will no longer patrol the outer borders or respond to distress calls from Council species. Ambassador Marshall. This is madness, a delegate from the Silent E congregation called out. His gaseous form swirled with agitation. You cannot simply leave. We can, Kevin replied. And we are. You have made it very clear that you do not want us here. You have told us, through this vote, that our help is not wanted, that our presence is feared, that our growth must be stopped. Very well, we accept your decision. We will trouble you no longer. He gathered the documents from his podium and handed them to Linda. She stood, and the rest of the human delegation rose with her. Together, they began walking toward the exit. There are procedures, Zelkoth called after them, his voice rising with the first hints of panic. Transition periods. Negotiations. You cannot simply walk away. Kevin stopped at the doorway and looked back over his shoulder at the High Arbiter. You should have thought of that before you voted. The doors sealed behind the human delegation. For a long moment, no one in the chamber moved or spoke. Then the whispers began. Quiet at first, then growing louder. What had just happened? What would it mean? Surely the humans were bluffing. They would return. They needed the council as much as the council needed them. But some of the older delegates, the ones who had studied human history, felt a cold fear growing in their hearts. They knew something about humans that the others had forgotten. Humans did not bluff. When they said they would do something, they did it. The Minotian Ambassador Yelthra sat in her seat, her forearms folded across her chest. She had voted against the resolution, arguing that it was foolish to antagonize such a valuable ally. Now she watched the door where the humans had disappeared and wondered what disasters were about to unfold. The galaxy, she realized, had just made a terrible mistake. Outside the chamber, Kevin Marshall walked in silence through the corridors of Nexus Prime. Linda hurried to keep pace beside. Do you think they will come after us? She asked quietly. No, Kevin replied. They will wait. They will assume we are posturing that we will come back when we realize how much we need them. And by the time they understand the truth, it will be too late. The truth? Kevin stopped and looked out a viewport at the stars beyond. The truth, Linda, is that we never needed them. We helped because it was the right thing to do. We served because we wanted to be part of something greater. But they never saw us as partners, only as tools. And now they will learn what it means to be without their tools. The human delegation boarded their ship and departed Nexus Prime. They did not look back. 3 weeks passed after the humans left. Nexus Prime, at first, many in the Galactic Council believed it was all a performance. The humans were angry, they said. They needed time to calm down. Soon they would return to the negotiating table, and some compromise would be reached. But the humans did not return. Their communication channels went silent. Their relay stations powered down. Their border checkpoints sealed shut. For the first time in 93 years, no human ships traveled through Council space. No human voices were heard on any frequency. And then the problems began. On the Cathari homeworld of Solvin, a doctor named Marathka noticed the first symptoms in a small coastal village. The patients had fever, shaking, and strange marks appearing on their silver scales. She recognized the signs immediately. It was the Shade Plague, the terrible disease that had killed millions of her people 20 years ago. That outbreak had only been stopped because human doctors discovered a cure. Human medical teams had remained on Cathari worlds ever since, monitoring for new cases and providing treatment. The disease had never truly been eliminated. It had only been contained through constant care and attention. Now those human medical teams were gone. Marathka contacted the Central Health Ministry on Cathari Prime. Within days, more reports came in. 17 outbreaks across 4 different worlds. The containment protocols were failing because no one else understood how the human treatment systems worked. The technology was too advanced, the procedures too complex. Prime Minister Salvathra stood before her parliament. Her normally bright scales now dull with exhaustion and fear. The death toll was rising every hour. Her people were dying, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. "We must contact the humans," one of her advisors urged. "Send a message. Beg them to return their doctors." "We have tried," Salvathra replied quietly. "Their borders are closed. They do not answer our calls." "Then send a ship. Go there in person. Any ship that approaches human space is turned back. They have made their position clear. They will not help us." In the chamber, several parliament members who had supported the original resolution against humanity sat in uncomfortable silence. They had voted yes because they feared human expansion. They had not considered what would happen without human medicine. Meanwhile, across the galaxy, High Arbiter Zelkoth faced his own crisis. The Vexery hegemony powered its ships with a rare substance called crystalline fuel. This material was extremely unstable and dangerous to transport. For decades, human freighters had carried the fuel from mining stations to Vexery ports. Human engineers had developed special containment technology that made safe transport possible. Now, the human freighters were gone. Zelkoth sat in his command chamber, reading the reports from his logistics council. The numbers were alarming. The hegemony's fuel reserves would last perhaps 2 months. After that, their fleet would begin to shut down. Ships would be stranded. Defense platforms would go dark. The mighty Vexery Navy, the pride of their species, would become nothing more than floating metal. "Find alternatives," Zelkoth ordered. "Other species must be able to transport the fuel we have tried, High Arbiter," his chief advisor replied. "The fuel is too dangerous. Without proper containment, a single accident could destroy an entire ship. Other species refuse to take the risk. Only the humans had the technology. Then we will build our own containment systems. That would take years, High Arbiter." "We do not have years." Zelkoth's compound eyes stared at the star map on his wall. He had led the effort to pass the resolution against humanity. He had argued that humans were a threat, that they grew too fast, that they must be controlled. Now his own fleet was dying because he had driven away the only species capable of keeping it alive. "This was not supposed to happen," he said quietly. On Nexus Prime itself, the situation was even worse. The Great Station had been built by many species over thousands of years, but its most critical systems had been designed and installed by humans. Life support, power distribution, gravity generators, all used human technology that no other species fully understood. Secretary Moroth of the Silent E congregation floated through the corridors in his containment suit. His gaseous form rippled with anxiety as he reviewed the damaged reports. The backup systems were failing. Temperature fluctuations were becoming dangerous. Some sections of the station had already been evacuated. He arrived at Zelkoth's temporary office. Since the High Arbiter had refused to leave the station despite the dangers, "The situation is critical," Moroth reported. "Our engineers estimate we have perhaps 6 weeks before the primary life support systems fail completely." "Then fix them," Zelkoth snapped. "We cannot. The technology is protected by human security codes. Without those codes, we cannot access the core systems. And even if we could, our engineers do not understand how the systems work. The humans built them. Only humans can repair them." Zelkoth was silent for a long moment. His mandibles clicked slowly, a sign of deep thought. "Send another message to the human government," he finally said. "Tell them we wish to negotiate." Moroth's form swirled with doubt. "They have not answered any of our previous messages. Keep trying. Offer concessions. Promise to repeal the resolution. Do whatever it takes. And if they still refuse?" The question hung in the air between them. Neither had an answer. Across the galaxy, other crises were unfolding. The Void Reavers, a race of savage warriors who lived only for conquest, had noticed the changes. Human battleships no longer patrolled the outer borders. Human soldiers no longer reinforced the defensive lines. The Reavers began to test the remaining defenses. Small raids at first, probing attacks to gauge the response. When the response proved weak, the raids grew larger. Colonies that had been protected for decades now found themselves under attack with no help coming. On the mining colony of Prethus IV, Governor Talek of the Minotian Republic sent desperate calls for aid. His world had been raided 3 times in 2 weeks. The local defense force was overwhelmed. They needed reinforcements. His calls were answered by a council military coordinator. "We are aware of your situation," the coordinator said, "but our resources are limited. The Vexari fleet is unable to respond due to fuel shortages. The Cathari are dealing with a medical emergency. We will send what ships we can, but it may be some time." "We do not have time," Talek replied. "The Reavers will return within days. Without help, we will be overrun." There was a long silence on the communication channel. "I am sorry, Governor. Do what you can to defend yourselves." The channel closed. Talek stood alone in his office, looking out at the twin suns of his world. For 60 years, human ships had protected this region. When Void Reavers attacked, human soldiers had come to fight beside his people. Now those ships and soldiers were gone. His world would pay the price. He thought about the resolution that had driven the humans away. He had not voted on it. He was just a governor of a small colony, far from the great debates of the council chamber. But he would live with the consequences. Or perhaps, he thought grimly, he would die from them. The galaxy was learning a harsh lesson. For almost a century, humanity had quietly held civilization together. They had cured diseases, protected borders, transported vital supplies, and maintained critical systems. Most species had taken this for granted. They had seen humans as servants, not partners. Now the servants were gone, and everything was falling apart. 2 months had passed since humanity closed its borders. The crises across the galaxy had grown worse with each passing day. The Galactic Council, once the proud symbol of interstellar cooperation, was now a place of fear and blame. In a desperate move, the remaining council members voted to send a formal delegation to human space. They would go in person, beg if necessary, and try to convince the humans to return. Ambassador Yelthra of the Minotian Republic was chosen to lead the mission. Her species had voted against the original resolution, which made her acceptable to both sides. She was known for her diplomatic skills and her ability to build bridges between hostile parties. Yelthra assembled a team of representatives from 12 different species. She included several who had voted for the resolution, hoping to show humanity that even their former opponents were now willing to make peace. A Vexari military commander named Torvik was assigned as their escort. Though Yelthra suspected he was also there to spy on the negotiations, their ship departed. Nexus Prime and traveled for 3 days through empty space before reaching the edge of human territory. The border was marked by a series of automated stations that broadcast warning messages in every known language. "Attention! You are approaching the sovereign space of the United Earth Government. Entry is restricted to authorized vessels only. Unauthorized vessels will be turned back. This is your only warning." Yelthra ordered her ship to stop at a safe distance. She broadcast a message identifying herself and requesting permission to enter human space for diplomatic purposes. There was no response. They waited for 6 hours. Torvik grew impatient, pacing back and forth on the bridge. "They are playing games with us," he growled, "testing our patience. We should push forward and force them to acknowledge us." "That would be foolish," Yelthra replied calmly. "The humans have every right to defend their borders. We are the ones who came here asking for help. We must wait." More hours passed. The delegation grew restless. Some began to doubt whether the humans would respond at all then. Finally, a small ship emerged from the nearest human station. It was clearly a civilian vessel, unarmed and unremarkable. It approached the delegation's ship and opened a communication channel. A woman's face appeared on the screen. She had graying hair pulled back in a simple style and tired eyes that suggested many sleepless nights. Her expression was neutral, neither friendly nor hostile. I am Carol Hughes, Border Administration, she said. State your business. Yelthra stepped forward. Her forearms folded in a gesture of respect. I am Ambassador Yelthra of the Minotian Republic. I lead a delegation from the Galactic Council. We have come to speak with your government regarding matters of great importance. Carol's expression did not change. The Galactic Council no longer has jurisdiction in human space. You are not authorized to enter, please, Yelthra said, abandoning the formal diplomatic language. We understand that humanity has grievances. We are here to address them. The situation in the galaxy has become desperate. The Shade Plague is killing thousands every day on Cathari worlds. The Void Reavers have conquered 3 systems. Nexus Prime itself is failing. We need your help. Carol was quiet for a moment. When she spoke again, her voice was flat. I understand. But those are no longer human problems. You made that decision when you voted for the resolution. The resolution has been repealed, Yelthra said quickly. The Council voted unanimously to withdraw it last week. All restrictions on humanity have been removed. You are free to expand, to build, to grow as you see fit. We ask only that you return. Carol nodded slowly. I am aware of the repeal. It does not matter. Yelthra felt her heart sink. Why not? For a moment, something flickered in Carol's tired eyes. It was not anger. It was something sadder, something deeper. Ambassador, let me ask you a question. Before the resolution, how many species on the Council truly saw humanity as equals? How many respected us as partners rather than useful servants? How many invited us to their cultural celebrations, studied our history, or cared about our art and music? Yelthra opened her mouth to answer, then closed it again. She could not lie. The truth was that most species had viewed humans as newcomers, as helpers, as the young species who did the dirty work that others found beneath them. Few had treated them as equals, Carol continued, her voice quiet but firm. We spent 93 years trying to prove ourselves. We cured your plagues. We fought your wars. We built your stations and transported your goods. And after all that, 31 species looked at us and decided we were a threat, that we needed to be contained, that we did not belong. She shook her head. You cannot unvote that, Ambassador. You cannot take back what that vote revealed. Humanity heard the message loud and clear. We were never truly accepted. We were tolerated. And now that tolerance has ended? But the people dying from the plague, Yelthra said desperately, the colonies being destroyed by the Reavers. They are innocent. They did not vote. No, they did not. And I am truly sorry for their suffering. But humanity cannot solve every problem in the galaxy. We cannot keep giving and giving while being told we are not wanted. Our people have their own needs, their own dreams, their own future to build. Carol's eyes softened slightly. Go home, Ambassador. Tell your council that humanity wishes them well. We are not enemies. But we are no longer servants either. If there is to be a future relationship between us, it must be built on different terms. What terms? Yelthra asked. That is for your species to decide. When you are ready to treat us as true partners, not as useful tools to be feared and controlled, perhaps we can talk again. The communication channel closed. The delegation sat in stunned silence. They had come expecting difficult negotiations, perhaps weeks of argument and compromise. Instead, they had been dismissed in minutes. Torvik broke the silence first. Arrogant creatures, he spat. They will regret this. Yelthra turned to look at him, her eyes cold. Commander, with respect. This is exactly the attitude that caused this disaster. They are not arrogant. They are hurt. We hurt them. We told them they did not belong, and now they have accepted that verdict. So what do we do? Another delegate asked. Yelthra looked out the viewport at the distant human station. We go home. We tell the council what we learned, and we begin the difficult work of examining ourselves, because the humans are right. We never treated them as equals, and until we understand why, nothing will change. The delegation ship turned and began the long journey back to Council space behind them. Carol Hughes watched from her station. When the alien ship had disappeared from her sensors, she finally allowed herself to sigh. She walked to her office and sat heavily in her chair. On her desk was a photograph of her son, a young man in a military uniform. He had died at Terminus Gate, fighting to protect a Cathari colony from Void Reavers. The Cathari had sent a formal thank you message. Then, 5 years later, they had voted for the resolution. She picked up the photograph and held it gently. "I am sorry," she whispered. "We tried so hard. We gave so much. But it was never enough for them." She placed the photograph back on her desk and returned to her work. The border needed to be maintained. Her duty continued. Far away in the depths of Council space, the Shade Plague claimed another village. A Vexery patrol ship ran out of fuel and drifted helplessly in space. A colony sent its final message before the Void Reavers. It burned it to ash. The galaxy was paying the price for its choices, and humanity simply watched and waited, wondered if there would ever be a true place for them among the stars. 6 months had passed. Since humanity closed its borders, the galaxy that had once been held together by cooperation and shared purpose was now tearing itself apart. The Cathari Collective had declared a state of emergency. The Shade Plague had spread to every inhabited world in their territory. Nearly 3 million of their people had died. Their hospitals were overwhelmed, their doctors exhausted, their supplies of medicine running low. Prime Minister Salvatore gave a speech to her people, BROADCAST, across all channels. Her voice was heavy with grief and anger. "We were betrayed," she said, "not by the humans, but by those who drove them away. The Council promised us security. Instead, they gave us death. My government will no longer participate in Council affairs. We must focus all our efforts on survival." The Cathari representative to the Council resigned publicly, blaming the other species for the disaster. He named specific delegates who had pushed for the resolution, including High Arbiter Zelkoth. The accusations created a storm of conflict and finger-pointing. The Vexery hegemony was in even worse condition. Without crystalline fuel, their mighty fleet had become useless. Warships that once patrolled 100 systems now sat dead in their hangars. Outer colonies, no longer protected by hegemony vessels, declared independence rather than wait to be conquered by the Void Reavers. High Arbiter Zelkoth had been removed from power in a quiet meeting of the hegemony's ruling council. His replacement was a younger commander named Vectos, who promised reforms and new alliances. But promises meant little when there was no fuel to power the ships that might enforce them. The Void Reavers had grown bolder with each passing week. They had conquered 7 systems, destroyed dozens of colonies, and enslaved thousands of people from a dozen species. Without human battlecruisers anchoring the defensive lines, the combined fleets of the remaining species proved inadequate to stop them. Each defeat led to more blame. The Minotians accused the Vexery of failing to protect shared borders. The Vexery blamed the Silenti for not providing better intelligence. The Silenti pointed at the Cathari for diverting resources to fight the plague. Old alliances crumbled. New conflicts emerged. Species that had cooperated for centuries now regarded each other with suspicion and hostility. Nexus Prime had been evacuated. The great station that had housed the Galactic Council for 12,000 years now drifted cold and empty. Its life support systems had failed exactly as predicted. The atmospheric processors had shut down. The temperature regulators had stopped working. And the power grid had collapsed section by section. The Council now met in a smaller station, a temporary facility that lacked the grandeur and history of Nexus Prime. The chamber was half empty. Many species no longer sent representatives. Some had withdrawn entirely, following humanity's example. Others were too busy dealing with their own crises to participate in meetings that produced nothing but arguments. Deputy Secretary Marith of the Silenti congregation had become the acting leader of what remained. He floated at the central podium, his gaseous form dimmer than it had once been. "We must find a way forward," he said. "We cannot continue like this." "Forward to what?" the new Vexery representative demanded. Our fleet is dead. Our colonies are burning. What future can you offer us? Morith had no answer. On Earth, life continued in a very different way. Regional Administrator Scott Patterson stood on the observation deck of the administrative complex in New Geneva. The Swiss Alps spread out before him, their peaks covered in snow, their valleys green with forests. It was a beautiful evening, with the sun painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. His assistant, Catherine Ellis, approached with a data tablet in her hands. She was a younger woman, efficient and dedicated, who had worked with Scott for 5 years. Another message from the Minotian Republic, she reported. Ambassador Yelthra is requesting a private meeting. Unofficial capacity. No council involvement. Scott did not turn from the window. Same answer as before. Catherine hesitated before speaking again, sir. With respect, the situation out there is getting worse every day. The humanitarian crisis is beyond anything in recorded history. Millions are dying. Entire civilizations are collapsing. We have the ability to help. Scott was quiet for a long moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was soft but firm. I know. I read the reports every morning. I see the death tolls. I watch the footage of burning colonies and crowded hospitals. And every time I feel the urge to help, every time I think about sending our ships back out there, I remember something. What? I remember that we helped for 9 to 3 years. We gave everything we had. We sent our doctors and our soldiers and our engineers to every corner of the galaxy. We cured their plagues and fought their wars and built their stations. And after all that, 31 species looked at us and decided we were a threat. He turned to face Catherine. His eyes tired but determined. We are not doing this out of cruelty. We do not enjoy their suffering. But if we go back now, nothing changes. They will accept our help because they are desperate. They will be grateful for a while, and then, when the crisis passes, they will fear us again. They will try to restrict us again. The cycle will never end. So what do? We wait, we build, we grow stronger, and eventually, either the galaxy learns to function without us, or they come to us with something more than desperation. What would that look like? Scott walked to a small table where a bottle of wine and 2 glasses sat waiting. He poured a glass and offered one to Catherine. It would look like genuine respect, genuine partnership, an acknowledgement that we are not tools to be used and then feared, that we are a civilization with our own values, our own culture, our own right to exist and grow. He took a sip of wine. When they can offer us that, truly offer it and mean it, then we can talk about the future. Catherine looked out at the mountains, and if they never do, then we will have our answer about whether we ever truly belonged there in the first place. And we will build our own future, separate from theirs. They stood in silence, watching the sun set over the Alps far away. In a small ship drifting through the space between stars, Ambassador Yelthra received Scott's rejection. It was the 7th time she had reached out, the 7th time she had been refused. She sat alone in her cabin, staring at the message on her screen. Around her, the galaxy was burning. Everything she had worked for, the dream of galactic unity and cooperation, was turning to ash. But she did not give up. She began writing another message, this one different from the others. Not a request for help, not a plea for mercy. Instead, she wrote about herself. Her childhood on the Minotian homeworld, her early career as a junior diplomat, the first time she met a human, a young trade negotiator named Peter Lang, who had shared his lunch with her when she forgot to bring her own. She wrote about the things she had noticed over the years, how humans worked harder than anyone else to prove themselves, how they celebrated the successes of other species as if they were their own, how they mourned the losses of alien soldiers as deeply as human ones. She wrote about her own failures, the times she had taken human help for granted, the moments when she had dismissed human concerns because they were newcomers, because they did not understand how things worked. The vote she had cast against the resolution, not out of respect for humanity, but out of strategic calculation, she wrote honestly, without diplomatic language. Without careful phrasing, I do not know if you will read this, she concluded. I do not know if it will change anything. But I wanted you to know that at least one person in this galaxy sees you clearly now. Not as servants or threats, as people. And I am sorry it took so long for me to understand." She sent the message and waited. Days passed. Then a week. She did not expect a response. Then on the 8th day, her communication console chimed with an incoming message. It was brief, just a few words. "Thank you for your honesty, Ambassador. We will remember it." It was not an invitation. It was not a promise. But it was something. A crack in the wall. A small light in the darkness. YELTHRA held on to that light. In a galaxy falling apart, it was all she had. 1 year had passed since humanity walked away from the Galactic Council. The galaxy had changed in ways no one could have predicted. The old order was gone. The Council still existed, but it was a shadow of what it had been. Only 23 species still sent representatives, down from 47. The great debates and grand resolutions had given way to desperate attempts to manage one crisis after another. No one spoke of galactic unity anymore. Survival was enough, but in the chaos, something new was beginning to grow. It started with a single ship, a small refugee transport, battered and barely functional. Carrying survivors from a Cathari colony that had been overrun by void reavers, the ship had fled blindly, its navigation systems damaged, jumping through space without any clear destination. By pure accident, it had crossed into human territory. Border Patrol vessel Meridian detected the ship near the outer markers. Captain Daniel Price was a veteran of 30 years in the service, a calm man who had seen many strange things in his career. But he had never seen an alien vessel in human space, not since the withdrawal. "Unidentified vessel," he announced through the communication channel. "You are in restricted human space. State your nature and purpose." There was no response from the ship, but the sensor readings told a clear story. 317 life signs aboard, many of them weak and fading. Medical alerts across the board. The ship was dying, and everyone on it would die with it. Daniel turned to his first officer, Lieutenant Maria Santos. "What do we have here?" Maria studied her console. Cathari refugee transport. Massive damage to all systems. They probably cannot even receive our messages. Their life support is failing. "I am detecting children among the passengers, Captain." Daniel looked at the readings for a long moment. Protocol was clear. Unauthorized vessels were to be turned back at the border. No exceptions. No humanitarian clauses. Those had been the rules since the withdrawal. But there were children on that ship. "Get me aligned to regional command," he ordered. 20 minutes later, Administrator Scott Patterson's face appeared on the screen. Daniel explained the situation quickly and clearly. "I understand your position, Captain," Scott said when Daniel had finished. "What is your recommendation?" Daniel took a breath before speaking. "Permission to render humanitarian assistance, sir. These are not politicians or diplomats. They are refugees. Families running from the void reavers. They are dying." Scott was quiet. On the screen, Daniel could see him thinking, weighing the decision. "You know the rules, Captain? You know why we put them in place?" "Yes, sir." "I do, and you still want to help them." Daniel looked out the viewport at the distant refugee ship. "Sir, humanity did not leave the Council because we stopped caring about other people. We left because the Council refused to see us as equals. These refugees did not vote for that resolution. They did not make any decisions about humanity. They are just caught in the middle of something bigger than themselves." He paused. "We can save them, sir. The question is whether we are still the kind of people who would want to." The silence stretched for what felt like hours. Then Scott nodded slowly. "Render assistance, Captain. Get them stable. And then we will figure out what comes next." Daniel felt something ease in his chest. "Yes, sir." Meridian out. The rescue operation began within the hour. Human medical teams boarded the refugee ship and found conditions worse than expected. The Cathari were crowded together in every available space, the healthy caring for the sick, the adults protecting the children. Many had injuries from the Reaver attack. Many more had the early signs of the Shade Plague. The human doctors did not hesitate. They set up emergency treatment stations, distributed medicine, stabilized the critically injured. They worked for 18 hours straight, saving lives without asking questions about politics or history. When the work was done, 312 of the 317 refugees had survived. It was not perfect, but it was far better than the alternative. A young Cathari girl named Valethra, no more than 10 years old, approached one of the human doctors as he was packing up his equipment. Her scales were pale, and her eyes were huge with wonder. "Why did you help us?" she asked in broken English, the language she had learned from trade broadcasts. "Your people left. You said you would not come back." The doctor, a man named Samuel Green, knelt down to look her in the eyes. "We left the council," he said gently. "We left the politicians and the debates and the resolutions. But we never stopped being human. And humans help people who need help. Even when it is hard. Even when we are angry." Valethra thought about this for a moment. "Will you help the others too?" "My grandmother is on Solven. The plague is there." Samuel did not know how to answer that question. It was above his authority, but he put a hand on her shoulder. "I do not know what will happen tomorrow, but I know that today you are safe. And sometimes that is enough." Word of the rescue spread quickly. It traveled through refugee networks and diplomatic channels and news broadcasts. The humans had not become monsters. They had not launched revenge attacks or demanded tribute. They had simply stepped back from the galaxy. And when innocents needed help, they had helped anyway. Over the following months, more ships came to the human border. Not official delegations or council representatives, but ordinary people. Scientists seeking research partnerships, traders looking for fair deals. Refugees seeking safety. They came not to demand or negotiate, but to ask, humbly and honestly, if there might be room for a new relationship, and humanity cautiously began to respond. A new station was built at the edge of human space. It was called Unity Gate, a place where humans and aliens could meet as equals, without the weight of council politics hanging over them. The station was modest at first, just a few docking bays and meeting rooms. But it grew quickly as more species came to participate. 1 year and 3 months after the withdrawal, Ambassador Kevin Marshall arrived at Unity Gate for a special ceremony. He was older now, his hair fully gray, but his eyes were still sharp. Beside him stood Linda Mercer, Scott Patterson, and dozens of other humans who had guided their species through the difficult year. Across from them stood a coalition of aliens. Not the full council, not the great powers who had voted for the resolution, but smaller groups. Species who had opposed the resolution from the beginning, or who had learned hard lessons in the years since. Ambassador Yelthra was among them, her forearms folded in the gesture of respect she had learned from her first human friend many years ago. "We cannot undo what was done," Yelthra said to Kevin. "We cannot take back the vote or the fear that caused it. All we can offer is a new beginning. A chance to build something different from what came before." Kevin studied her for a long moment. He remembered the day he had walked out of the council chamber. He remembered the anger and the hurt and the determination. He remembered the long year of silence, watching the galaxy struggle without human help. "A new beginning," he repeated slowly. "Not with the council. Not with the old rules and the old assumptions. Something entirely new. Yes, if you will have us," Kevin extended his hand. The human gesture of friendship and agreement. "We will try," he said. "But understand this. We will never again be junior partners begging for acceptance, proving ourselves over and over to people who will never see us as equals. We walk with you as true partners, or we walk alone. That is not a threat. It is simply the truth." Yelthra took his hand in her own. "Then let us walk together, and let us see where the path leads." Outside the station, ships from a dozen species drifted in formation alongside human vessels. It was not the grand unity of the old council. There were no great declarations or formal treaties. Just people from different worlds choosing to work together because they wanted to, not because they had to. In the distance, the stars burned with the same light that had shone for billions of years. They did not care about politics or resolutions, or the petty conflicts of mortal species. They simply existed, vast and eternal, waiting for those brave enough to reach for them. Humanity had walked away from the galaxy, and in doing so, they had finally found their true place among the stars. Not as servants or soldiers, not as threats to be contained, but as equals. As partners, as members of a community that they had helped to build, piece by piece, from the ashes of what came before. It was not a perfect ending. There would be more conflicts, more challenges, more moments of doubt. The Void Reavers still threatened the outer systems. The Shade Plague still needed to be fought. Old wounds would take generations to fully heal, but for the first time in their history among the stars, humanity faced the future with hope. Not the desperate hope of newcomers trying to prove their worth, but the quiet confidence of a people who finally knew who they were, and that, perhaps, was worth more than any resolution the Council could have passed. The story of humanity. And the galaxy was not over. In many ways, it was just beginning.